So, humane relocation. As I said, it's a practice where shelters and rescues move animals, adoptable animals, from overpopulated areas to regions where demand for adoptable pets is high. The goal of humane relocation is to increase the opportunity for better outcomes and reduce euthanasia of adoptable pets. So while today humane relocation is about balancing supply and demand of adoptable pets in order to reduce euthanasia, it wasn't always the case. Humane relocation as a standard practice actually came out of a place that you might not have thought of. It was August 2005 when Hurricane Katrina came calling. Any of you go through Hurricane Katrina? Know someone who did, loved ones? Yeah, really scary time. Millions of people had to pack up their homes and evacuate. At the same time, animal shelters were being cleared out ahead of the storm. Animals, all of the animals in Louisiana were relocated to Houston. And other locations in Texas saw animals being transferred in from other areas of the Gulf Coast in an effort to move the animals to a location that was believed to be safer. Once those locations in Texas became bursting at the seams, the animals were moved again to other locations. And so this was the first time in history that we saw this kind of coordination between shelters and rescues and the mass transfer of animals from one location to another. And so this was the beginning of humane relocation. So while folks were getting themselves out of harm's way, they also had to think about what to do with their pets. And it just an excruciating decision that had to be made. For folks that were evacuating by car, they may not have had a place that would accommodate their pets when they got there. The Red Cross shelters did not allow pets. Many of the hotels that were taking in evacuees prohibited pets also. And so these folks very often could not bring their pets with them. People who were evacuating on foot obviously could not take their pets. Those that were evacuating by mass transit, particularly bus, were denied boarding if they had pets with them. And lastly, in New Orleans, the Superdome that held some 10,000 people ahead of the Katrina would hold 20,000 people after the disaster of the levees failing, and no animals were allowed in the Superdome. So lots of people evacuated, most people, some more than 1 million people from the region evacuated to safer areas. But 150 to 200,000 people chose to stay in New Orleans as Katrina approached. 44% of those people did so to stay with their pets. Unfortunately, once the levees failed and these folks had to be rescued themselves, they faced the same issue of not being able to bring their pets with them. Rescuers were not required to allow the pets onto rescue transport, and so many people who had stayed and risked their own lives to care for their animals were eventually separated from their animals anyway. So in New Orleans alone, there were 44,000 pets that were rescued after once it was safe for people to go back into the city. Now, I don't have it on this slide because it's hard to swallow, but there were some, at least 60,000 pets estimated perished in the storm. Of those 44,000 pets, 2,700 were returned to their owners, and 95% of the remaining pets were transferred out of Louisiana for adoption. So what we're looking at is, again, a mass movement of pets out of one area to another area. And so it's becoming a practice that the shelters and rescues are comfortable with, and really have put together a process to help animals by relocating them this way. One thing I will say about all this is that these numbers are, as reported by the Louisiana SPCA and the ASPCA. Certainly, there are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of pets that were saved by regular residents of New Orleans and other locations, and also pets that were rescued by organizations that didn't necessarily report the rescues to the Louisiana SPCA. So there are certainly more animals that were saved than may necessarily be reflected here. And just so I can show more cute pictures of doggies and kitties, these are some images of Katrina animals that were saved and went on to have lives outside of New Orleans generally, and perhaps even outside the region. But these animals are all saved. I particularly like Nola, and Desiree looks like kind of a champion rock star there. One positive that came out of all of this tragedy was the PETS Act. It's Pets Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act, which is a federal law and that was enacted in direct response to the failures after Katrina. It was introduced on September 22nd, 2005, less than 1 month after Katrina made landfall. It basically requires that states accommodate pets and service animals in their plans for evacuating residents facing disasters. This was in an effort to ensure that nothing like Katrina happened again to pet animals and to their owners. So the legislation passed on May 22nd by a margin of 349 to 29. I'd like to know who those 29 are, because I'm not sure how you can oppose this. But it was signed into federal legislation on October 6, 2006. So just a little over a year after Katrina.